Welcome to Running Hot, Action Network's motorsports betting podcast. I'm your host, Nick Giffen, predictive analyst here at Action Network. And joining me, as always, my co-host, Stephen Young of Roto-Grinders, better known as Stevie TPFL. And this week, we're talking bets for the Toyota Save Mart 350 at Sonoma Raceway here on Running Hot. Last weekend at Gateway, Austin Cindric took a surprise win after both Christopher Bell and Ryan Blaney ran into issues late in the race. Christopher Bell's engine started stuttering, and then coming to the white flag, Ryan Blaney, Austin Cindric's Penske teammate, ran out of fuel while leading, which handed Austin Cindric the win over Denny Hamlin in second place. That gets Austin Cindric into the playoffs and moves that playoff cut line up a little bit. So definitely some drama in the playoff scenario. Definitely a dramatic finish there. Stevie, thoughts on Gateway and thoughts on the playoff picture right now? Because it's getting interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Gateway was okay. Like, it was an okay race. I feel like it has a lot of potential if we can figure out, like, the aero blocking on, like, this car in general. I think Gateway is a track that we should not get rid of because it's unique and it's different. And I feel like the fast cars were able to move through the field a little bit, but I mean, you really had to have a fast car. I mean, we had outrights on Bell and Blaney, so like maybe I'm just a little like salty on how the race kind of finished up more than anything else. But I mean, overall, I feel like Gateway has a lot of potential, and I thought the racing was okay. It wasn't fantastic, but it was okay. I do want to see them go back to Gateway and maybe with a different tire or this package, just like intermediate package is not terrible on the intermediate tracks, but like it's just not working at a track like this. So yeah, I mean, and then as far as like the playoff picture is really interesting, just in general, because I mean, like now that rightfully so, Kyle Larson got his waiver. It would have been a huge black eye if he didn't get the waiver, and I'm going to stay by that. But I mean, the playoff picture now is like super interesting because like there's still plenty of drivers that are like right at the cut line or right below the cut line that can win races. And like we are coming to some of those racetracks where those guys are good at. So I think it's going to be a fantastic like ending to the regular season. Like we might get to the last couple races and like one win might not be enough. I mean, I could see multiple winners from here on out, and I think it's just going to be fun.
Yeah, definitely a wild case here with Chris Buescher currently on the playoff bubble, in to the good here by 10 points over Chase Briscoe. Then another 4 points back of Briscoe is Joey Logano, and then another 6 points back of him is Kyle Busch. And 3 points ahead of Chris Buescher is Bubba Wallace, also inside the cut line here. But if anybody outside that playoff cut line wins, that will move the playoff cut line up more and more. And that could definitely happen as early as this weekend here at Sonoma. We have a couple drivers on the outside looking in that I think have the potential to win at Sonoma. So that is going to be a very interesting thing to keep our eye on. But we do want to talk about Sonoma. Sonoma is a 1.99 mile road course. It was repaved this offseason. That'll definitely change some things up when we talk about racing at Sonoma. Now, classically, Sonoma has been pretty difficult to pass at, but at least it had chewed up tires and we would get some tire wear. And if you're able to a little bit better manage your tires, you could make some passes on longer runs at Sonoma. But Stevie, how does racing change at Sonoma potentially with this repave?
I mean, it changes a lot because now the tire strategy is gone. Like we saw, I think it was like 3 or 4 or 5, it might have even been like 6 years ago, where like Kevin Harvick and Martin Truex Jr. were kind of battling it out, and like they ran like 10 extra laps, and it made a huge difference at the end of the race. And I think it was Truex was able to pass to win the race. But I mean, the one thing you hope for here is like, because it is repaved, maybe the passing zones are a little bit wider and like we might see a little bit more like passing side by side. I think it's going to be one or two things, Nick. I think it's either going to be like a single car train around the track and we're just going to go out and run the laps, or we're going to see because of the repave, we're going to see like 2 areas or 3 areas where you're really able to drive in and outbrake somebody and able to pass. I don't think there's any in between. I really don't. I'm hoping for NASCAR's sake that the repave opens up braking zones and we're able to see more passing, because I love Sonoma in general. I think it's one of the original road courses that you have to be a driver. It's just this car has made road course racing easier in general. So I think it's going to be one of the two. I hope it's not the train. I hope we see some braking zones because of the repave, and I hope that's going to be the case.
I have a theory on this, and I think we're going to see, and this even kind of goes in towards oval theory, where we see old tracks versus newer tracks. We get a lot of incidents at newer tracks because you have so much more grip. You're so much more on the aerodynamic edge at ovals, right? Because instead of going 160 at a mile and a half, you're going 180 at a mile and a half average speed. And so you're much more on the edge aerodynamically. I think with all this grip, like you're talking about, we could see some dive bombs. We could see more incidents. So I think we could have a more wild Sonoma than we have had in the past. I mean, we've had a couple years where we get almost no cautions except for the stage cautions. So I think we could see a little more wild Sonoma this year, which might make it a little more interesting. But outside of that, I think it is going to be, like you said, extra hard to pass in single file trains. So I think it's going to be a combination of both. We'll see some single file with some desperate moves, which will cause some incidents. So that's my little theory on Sonoma. But Sonoma presents some other interesting topics here, because we just talked about the playoff picture. We talked about some drivers that are inside, some drivers that are outside. And of course, a win pretty much gets you in. There's no guarantee, but a win probably gets you in. So there's that aspect of Sonoma. But then there's also the points aspect, which leads to strategy, given that we have these stage yellows, these stage cautions. Typically at road courses, the optimal strategy is to pit before the yellow flag comes out, because you'll stay on the lead lap. And then when the yellow comes out, you'll pack back up to the field, and then everybody that pits under yellow will cycle back behind you. So you'll be good to go. And they'll only have, 1 or 2 laps fresher tires than you, which isn't going to make any difference at all on a repave track. So that's typically the strategy here. So Stevie, we need to figure out what drivers are going to be potentially on which strategies here.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have a win, I feel like you're going to be on the optimal strategy. The only person that might not be is like a Martin Truex Jr. I feel like he knows he's going to either pick up a win somewhere or not, but he has 2 stage wins this year, so not a ton of playoff points yet. Where like Kyle Larson has 7, Bell has 6, like Hamlin has 3. Like you're playing catch up a little bit. So I feel like maybe a William Byron takes a stage win or 2 here and tries to pad the stage wins a little bit, because he has 3 race wins now, but he only has 1 stage win, and like those playoff points carry throughout the rounds of playoffs. So I feel like those type of drivers, like a Brad Keselowski who now has a win, a Daniel Suarez who has a win, might try to stay out and win a stage if they're given the opportunity. But I feel like guys like Gibbs, Bowman, Chastain, Blaney, Bubba, I mean, maybe Bubba gets points here because he's not the best road course racer, so maybe he stays out and gets some points if he can. But I feel like if you're Buescher, Blaney, Chastain, Bowman, Kyle Busch, Joey Logano, you're trying to win this race. You got to be on that optimal strategy. So I think like when you're looking at drivers that don't have a win, they're going to be guys that are going to be pitting early. Michael McDowell, like guys that have like the absolute chance to pick up your win of the season here. And the guys that potentially already have a win that need some stage wins could potentially stay out. But I think the optimal strategy, we're going to see a lot more, kind of what we saw at COTA earlier this year, where we're going to see a lot of people pit.
I tend to disagree a little bit. I think a guy like Ty Gibbs will probably points race, because he's pretty much in if he just grabs stage points at this point. He's not going to fall out. The cut line's not going to move up enough to where he is, almost he's 100 points clear, more than 100 points clear of Kyle Busch, of Chase Briscoe, 107 points clear. You just need to get your stage points and get your finishes at this point. So unless he's up in that top 3 or 5, I could see him points racing. I also think Alex Bowman, Ross Chastain, Ryan Blaney, all could points race if they don't feel like they have winning cars. And I could see all three of them potentially not have winning cars. I think Ross has the best opportunity of those three. But really Bowman hasn't been close at Sonoma, and Blaney is not really a Sonoma driver either. So I think those three could points race as well, given they've kind of are on a next tier up from Chris Buescher and Bubba Wallace in the point standings, right? Bubba Wallace at 371 points, but Ryan Blaney is 34 points ahead of him at 405. And Chastain and Bowman are another 12 points clear. So getting points would really help them, really help insulate them from, the cut line potentially moving up if somebody like a Michael McDowell were to win this weekend. So I do think there's opportunity for those guys to points race as well. But I agree with you pretty much on all the rest of those things. I could definitely see Martin Truex Jr. and Ty Gibbs points racing. I could see, like you said, some of these guys grabbing a stage win, especially if they feel like they don't have a winning car, but are riding in that back half of the top 10. Then those leaders come in and pit. You just stay out and you grab your stage playoff point. So yeah, I agree with you for the most part on most of that, but I do think there's a couple drivers that could go either way here. So Stevie, let's talk about handicapping this race. Obviously the repave does make Sonoma a little bit different, but how are you handicapping it? You pulling in other tracks? You just looking at Sonoma history? Does that change with the repave? What do you think?
I'm just looking at road course speed in general. Like, it's just speed. I'm not even necessarily looking at finishes, because like we've had multiple different kinds of strategies now. Like, we had stage cautions, we didn't have stage cautions, we had stage breaks. So I'm just looking at speed. I want to know who's fast, and that's kind of what I'm going to be looking at overall. I mean, there was a tire test at Sonoma. It was Ross Chastain, Josh Berry, and Martin Truex Jr. I think those guys get a bump because they've had an extra 100 laps on the racetrack just in general. So I think there's a bump to those guys. But overall, I mean, I'm just looking at speed. I don't necessarily care too much about like finishing position. Who's been fast on road courses with the next gen car is what I'm looking at this weekend.
Yeah, I agree. I'm mostly just looking at road course speed. I do think a little bit of Sonoma history matters.
Yeah.
Certain drivers are better at Sonoma than they are at, like, let's say Watkins. Like, classically back in the day, Keselowski, and this has shifted now, but back in the day when Keselowski was with Penske, he was always good at Watkins Glen, and he's always just mid at Sonoma. So it was one of those things where definitely some specific track history would come into play. And I do think there's a little bit of specific track history with certain drivers. Like, this is definitely Tyler Reddick's worst road course, for example. Does that change with the repave? So I'm not weighing Sonoma history as much as I used to, but I certainly think a little bit of track history does come into play here. Also, one more quick question. We got two more drivers coming in from the Supercar series. We had, old SVG, Shane Van Gisbergen, pull the win off last year at the Chicago Street Course. This year, we have Will Brown and Cam Waters coming in. Will Brown is going to run in that 33 RCR car. Cam Waters in the 60 RFK racing car. Any thoughts on them real quick?
Yeah, I think this is a different scenario. Like, one of the reasons that SVG was so good at Chicago last year was he's had a lot of time in supercars on damp racing conditions and very tight spaces. Like, you're not the wall in like the city is not on top of you at Sonoma like it is at the Chicago road course. So I think they'll be fast. I'm not saying that I don't expect them. They're in good equipment, RCR and RFK equipment. So I think like there's potential for them to have like maybe some top 10 upside. I don't think they come in and win like SVG did. I think the conditions were just absolutely stellar for SVG last year. But I think they'll be fast. I think, do they have some upside? Should we be looking at them in betting markets? I think the books have kind of overvalued their, abilities, and there's not a ton of value, but it's tough. And I will say, like, I'm just going to go ahead and get this out there now. I don't have any outrights yet this week. So I'm waiting. I want to see what the repave is going to be like. Are we going to see the ability to move around on the racetrack and stuff? And if we're just running single file, they should be on the right strategy because they're not running for points. But I think, if anything, I'd be looking at them in like the top 10 markets more than anything else.
Well, I took a funzie on Cam Waters top 3 at 18.
I love it. So I like Waters more than I like Will Brown, for what it's worth. The RFK cars have been better than the RCR cars this year.
Yeah, that was kind of my theory. And looking at the Supercars standings, Waters is behind Will Brown, but it's an equipment thing. Will Brown and his teammate are running away with the championship. And if you look at Cam Waters versus his teammate, Waters is blowing his teammate out of the water. So to me, it's just a equipment thing, which is why Waters is behind Will Brown. He actually was neck and neck with Brown last year in the points and blew him away the year before. So just a little random analysis there on our two Supercars drivers that are joining us. But it is time to dive into some bets. As always, we're going to take you for a lap around Sonoma. Now, instead of every single turn at Sonoma, we'll just do 4 of the turns. 1 pick from Stevie, 1 pick from myself before we drive into victory lane. So we're going to throw the green flag on the Toyota Save Mart 350 and make that left-hander into turn 1. Okay, Stevie, turn 1 pick. What do you got for us here?
Yeah, I'm going to go to a head-to-head here on BetMGM. It's Tyler Reddick over Chase Elliott at -110. Chase Elliott is the favorite in this one because of his history on road courses, but when we go to the next-gen era, Tyler Reddick's been the best. He's been the fastest. He's the guy to beat in the next-gen car. Chase Elliott's been good. I'm not saying that he hasn't been, but if we look more at like 2023, Chase Elliott was not as fast. Like he was like 6th or 7th in speed rankings, where Reddick was 1st. So Reddick's just been fast at every road course we've gone to except for Watkins Glen. So I feel like Tyler Reddick should be the favorite on this head-to-head. So I'm going to take a little bit of value here and pay a little bit of juice and get Tyler Reddick. And kind of looking at where these guys are at points-wise, I feel like if Chase has an opportunity to win a stage and he doesn't have like a race-winning car, he will. Tyler Reddick, I mean, this is a really good opportunity for Tyler Reddick to win, and I think he's going to have a race-winning car. So I think they would be on the optimal strategy. Even though they both have a win, I feel like Chase is probably more likely to stay out, especially looking at like the past for these two guys as well. Reddick's crew chief has been more of the optimal strategy more than Chase Elliott has been.
Yeah, I agree with that. In terms of the strategy, I definitely think Chase Elliott is a good guy to target in terms of like who might stay out and grab that stage point, which would potentially put him off of an optimal strategy here. So I agree with you there. I have him pretty much neck and neck with my model. But, you know, with that said, if that's a tiebreaker for you, I definitely think that's a very good tiebreaker because I do see this as a realistic opportunity for Chase Elliott to go off strategy and grab a stage point here. For my turn 1 pick, this is a little scary, but I'm going to take Michael McDowell over William Byron in qualifying. And it's as simple as the fact that in the next-gen car, so the last 2 years at Sonoma, Michael McDowell's average qualifying position is 3.5, and William Byron's average qualifying position is 23rd. He's never started better than 20th, William Byron. And Michael McDowell's never started worse than 4th. So that's just a huge discrepancy. And you can't really go back before that because in 2021, we had a different car. It was a different layout for Sonoma. And then 2020, we had the COVID year. They didn't race at Sonoma. 2019 was the old layout, old car. And then you're going back 18, I should say, was now we have the same layout. But I mean, that's back when Front Row was a much smaller team, different car and so forth. So we only really have 2 relevant data points to look at. And Michael McDowell has absolutely blown William Byron out of the water in qualifying. Do I think that changes a bit this year with the repave? Absolutely. I think that can change. Plus, you know, if we talk about testing, Ford did send Josh Berry to test, which is a little bit puzzling. They weren't the fastest Ford at Circuit of the Americas earlier this year. So there could be a little bit of questions with his Ford body on road courses. But I think that brings them closer to equal, whereas William Byron has been so clearly far ahead that Michael McDowell has been so clearly far ahead of William Byron that I still think even with some contracting, I would still have Michael McDowell over William Byron in qualifying.
Yeah, so we talk about like road course history mattering a little bit, right? Like William Byron has been phenomenal on road courses with the next gen car, but he continues to struggle at Sonoma. Like this is the one. Like if you look at his road course speed, he's like top 10 everywhere in speed except for Sonoma. So I just don't know. Maybe he just hasn't figured this track out. The only thing that I'll say, like race-wise, with the repave, William Byron might be a little bit better. He's not great at managing his tires on this racetrack, so that could potentially be something. But practice, I mean, listen, at the end of the day, Michael McDowell is just phenomenal at putting down one lap. Like, he's just really good. And we talk about like his qualifying. I felt so good about your top 10 McDowell bet last week after he got the pole. And that caution at the end of stage 1 messed up McDowell so bad. But anyway, well, that's it anyway. But yeah, I mean, I don't hate this one. I'm about to talk about how I like Michael McDowell as well.
Yeah. Man, last week was so brutal. We had our victory lane pick as Ryan Blaney, and we were good until the white flag came out. We had that McDowell top 10. A lot of things that went wrong that could have gone right, but that's betting NASCAR. So turn 1 down, time to dive into that right-hander into turn 2. Okay, Stevie, second turn. It looks like you got a little funsy parlay here. I like it. BetMGM parlay.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't know if we've done a parlay for head-to-heads ever on the podcast, but I was looking through some stuff last night, and I really like this. So you could parlay your head-to-heads over on BetMGM. So I'm going to take Ty Gibbs over Kyle Busch and Michael McDowell over Daniel Suarez at plus 178. I really think that this is an excellent opportunity for Ty Gibbs and Kyle Busch to pick up a win. And speed-wise, they're very, very similar in speed. And I just think that I have Ty Gibbs a little bit higher than Kyle Busch, and especially if we look at just this season as far as like raw speed, Kyle Busch has been struggling. So, but he's been fantastic in the next-gen car on road courses. So I feel like this might be the coin flip of this parlay, but it was able to get me the odds I wanted. I do like Ty Gibbs more than Kyle Busch, but I really like Michael McDowell over Daniel Suarez. There's no reason where they're at points-wise right now with this 34 car for them to stay out for stage wins. They need to win. There's no way they're going to get in on points right now where they're at, and this is an excellent opportunity for Michael McDowell. He's fast on road courses. He's good at Sonoma. He's been one of the best cars here the last 2 times we've been here with the next-gen car. Different strategies. I mean, 2022 was a different strategy to 2023, and he was fast in both of those races, and he finished 3rd and 7th. And the race that we had this type of strategy with the stage cautions, he finished 3rd, and Daniel Suarez won that race. So I understand the potential of Daniel Suarez winning again, but really, like, Daniel Suarez has kind of been all over the place on road courses. Even at Sonoma last year, he's been really good or really bad. So I'm going to take the speed that we've seen in McDowell, and I'm going to take the consistency that we've seen in McDowell in qualifying to get us that track position on a driver that I feel like is going to be on the proper strategy. Nick and I talked pre-show. If I was going to outright bet somebody right now, it'd be McDowell. I really like his ceiling this weekend.
So just real quick on Suarez, he was going to be really good at this track last year. He qualified 9th, and right on the start, he thought he was in the Xfinity car, thought he was 8 shifting, and downshifted instead of upshifted, and destroyed his engine on very initial start of the race. So
I remember that.
Last year I'm throwing out for Daniel Suarez.
Yeah,
I'm only looking at 2022 for Daniel Suarez. But I pretty much threw that one out as relevant data there for Daniel Suarez, right? When I do my flags metric, I look at healthy cars. He was not a healthy car after the first lap. He wasn't even a healthy car completing the first lap. So he doesn't have a flags number for me in this race from last year. But with that said, I'm with you. My turn to pick is Michael McDowell to win. You can get him longest odds anywhere, 17-1 at BetMGM. You said it all, though. I mean, this is a guy, he's going to be on the optimal strategy. He needs a race win. He's too far out to be able to point his way into the playoffs, right? He's sitting there 24th in points, 255 points behind Chris Buescher's at 268. He's not making up 113 points. So he has to win. Michael McDowell is going for the win at Sonoma. Michael McDowell is great at Sonoma. I have Michael McDowell at 15-1 as fair in my model. So I will definitely grab 17-1 on Michael McDowell as my turn to pick. I know you don't really need to add any extra thoughts here, Stevie. So we're going to head on over toward turn 3. But before we get there, I need to remind you all Running Hot is presented by BetMGM. Use bonus code ACTION when signing up to get up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet does not win. for new users in Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Okay, Stevie, we're going to head down. I guess it's a little bit of I wouldn't call it a backstretch, but there's a little bit of a short shoot there between turns 2 and turns 3. And then we're going to make a left-hander into turn 3. What do you got for us?
Yeah, I'm going to go to my boy AJ Allmendinger here for top Chevy at 8-1. I mean, here's the thing. AJ is a phenomenal road course racer. We know it. They're going to bring him a good piece this weekend. He's going to have the ceiling. He's going to complain about how bad his car is when he qualifies inside the top 10 and has a ton of speed. The thing here that I'm looking at is just there's so many question marks on some of these Chevys on, like, are they going to stay out? Are they not going to stay out? What type of strategy are they going to be on? Are they going to try to win stages? We don't have to worry about that with AJ. He's not points racing. They're going to be on the optimal strategy. He's going to pit early both times here. He's going to give himself the best chance to win this race, and you're going to talk about that with your pick, but I like AJ as the top Chevy here at 8-1. My model is showing this at like plus 650 as fair value, so I'm definitely going to jump on 8-1 here for top Chevy for AJ.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. My turn 3 pick is AJ Allmendinger to win at 16-1. And yeah, I mean, it's everything you said. He's going to be on the optimal winning strategy, whatever you want to call it, the premier strategy. So I have 13-1 as fair on AJ Allmendinger to win. I actually bet him at 18-1 yesterday, so on Wednesday, but that line has since shortened to 16-1. That's still the longest out there. I would definitely still bet that, given I have 13-1 on him to win. And there's not a lot else you need to say about AJ Allmendinger. I mean, he's great at every road course. I actually think the repave could help him a little bit, just from the fact that I think he can get more out of having that extra grip because he is a road course specialist than maybe some other drivers could. So, I think that was always one thing with AJ Allmendinger. He drives so hard that he kind of burns his tires off sometimes, and that costs him on the long run. But I think with the repave here, I don't think it's going to be as much of a problem for him to burn his tire off. And I think he can use that extra grip, go deeper into these corners, and with his road racing talent, I think this benefits him hugely. So I love AJ Allmendinger 16-1 as my turn 3 pick. So we have one more turn to go, and that's turn 4. Okay, Stevie, final turn here that we're going to give out on the podcast. Turn 4, what do you got for us?
Yeah, I'm going to go to the top 10 market here with Ross Chastain at plus 115. Ross is not like this guy you would consider like a fantastic road course racer. He had speed here in 2022. Last year, he was okay. He wasn't great. I'm betting on the fact that like Ross got a whole day of testing at Sonoma. He was one of the drivers that got to test the repave, and he had a lot of track time. And if you give Ross Chastain a lot of track time, I feel like he's going to benefit from that. They're going to come with a really good setup and be ready to go here with this car. So I think this top 10 market is a good market for him. And he's kind of one of those drivers that like he's okay on points right now, but if we have 2 or 3 guys win outside of the bubble, he'd be right there on the bubble. So I think if they have an opportunity to be a race winning car, they're going to be on the right strategy. So I'm going to go to Ross Chastain here for a top 10. And I mean, he was on the right strategy for Coda. So I'm kind of hoping that we see that again here.
Yeah. I mean, Ross Chastain, I have as pretty highly rated here at Sonoma. So, I definitely, this is a good track for him. He's pulled off 2 strong finishes, top 10 finishes. So I do like him here a lot. And I think even if he is off of the optimal strategy, he can still place in that back half of the top 10. So I think you're getting good value on Ross Chastain either way you go, whether he's on the optimal strategy or not. So totally fine with Ross Chastain, top 10 at plus money. For my turn 4 pick, this is another one that kind of in the same boat here as Ross Chastain. I could see him going either way, points racing or for the win. But I think even more likely than Ross, I think Chris Buescher is likely to go for the win. And Chris Buescher is 14-1 So that is my pick, Chris Buescher, to win 14-1. Look, if this playoff cut line moves up, all of a sudden Buescher's on the outside looking in. So points racing means a little bit less to him than it does a Ross Chastain or an Alex Bowman or Ryan Blaney. And Chris Buescher has been amazing at Sonoma, finishes of second and fourth place. So, I mean, if we're talking track history, he arguably has the strongest track history in the next gen car. And obviously, I think he could be on the optimal strategy. So it's just a spot. I mean, we're talking about a guy who pretty much finishes in the top 11 in every single road course race in the next gen era. So like that's his floor, is a top 11. So I'm happy to get a guy with 2 top 5 finishes here at 14-1, especially with how well RFK has been performing as of late.
Yeah, I think it's very underrated how good the Fords have been speed-wise this year, especially over the last month or so. So yeah. I'm with you on Buescher. If we look at speed rankings, he's been the best here in the next-gen era. So I don't hate this idea of getting him. And, I mean, he's finishing inside the top 10 in 5 of the last 6 since the start of last season. So Buescher is just consistent. If we look at just the traditional road courses, COTA, Road America, Sonoma, Watkins Glen, he's just consistently finishing up front. So, yeah, I mean, I have no issues with a Chris Buescher bet here.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just a guy who always seems to get it done at road courses. So those are our 4 turns that we have done. We're coming around that hairpin on the final turn. We're taking the checkered flag, and we got to drive into victory lane. Now, based off one of your earlier bets, Steve, we got to thread a needle here a little bit. But we can definitely do this. So what is our victory lane pick?
Yeah, we're going to go to Kyle Busch, top 10 here at plus 140. We're getting a lot of value with this one because now Kyle Busch is on the outside looking in, playoff pitcher-wise. And I know we still have a good month, 2 months of, talking about the playoffs. But, Joey Logano and Kyle Busch are on the outside looking in. They're not in a position they can really points race. And Kyle has been phenomenal on road courses. His finishes have been great. The switch over to RCR has actually helped him in the road course department. So we're getting a guy that ranks 6th in speed since the beginning of last year in road courses at plus 140 for a top 10 here. So really like Kyle. It's one of my favorite bets of the weekend. I'm glad that you're on board with this one as well. But I mean, just getting really my model has this almost even as fair value. So getting this at plus 140 shows one of the biggest value bets for me on this weekend.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I love this bet. And so when I said thread the needle, right, we need Ty Gibbs to finish ahead of him for your parlay. We still need Kyle Busch to finish in the top 10. So a back half of top 10 with Ty Gibbs in the front half of the top 10 would be ideal here. But no, I agree with you. Last year, Kyle Busch finished 2nd. He was 5th in green flag speed. He was 5th in my flags metric. And if we remove 2022, because he was with Joe Gibbs Racing in 2022, and JGR was horrendous at road courses in 2022. All Toyota was. There was something going on with that car at road courses when transferring over to the next gen car. It was the first year of the next gen era. If we remove that, Kyle Busch's finishes at Sonoma since 2015, so over the past decade, are 1, 7, 5, 5, 2, 5, 2, right? That's a worst of 7th. And that includes a 2nd place last year in this very RCR car that he is going to be in. So, yeah, you got to take Kyle Busch at plus money for a top 10. So I'm right there with you, Stevie. Victory lane pick, Kyle Busch, top 10, plus 140. So that is going to do it for us. Thanks for listening to the Toyota Save Mart 350 episode of Running Hot, Action Network's motorsports betting podcast. We'll be back next week as we talk bets for the Iowa Corn 350 at Iowa Speedway, a new track for the NASCAR Cup Series. On behalf of my co-host, Stephen Young, thanks again for listening. We'll see you back next week on Running Hot from Action Network.